Hi everybody, Danny here with Night Owl's Pin and Promo Department. We wanted to create some video tutorials that will hopefully help you when creating and prepping your designs for different merch items you'd like to make. So in this first video, I'll go ahead and show you some of the tools that we use to determine whether an enamel pin design will be viable, meaning that it will come out looking the way that the customer or the artist intended on the final product. So for this video, I'm going to use one of Craig Gleason's pin designs as an example. This is a pin that we did for him last fall. So the first thing that we'll want to do when we get a pin design in is we'll go ahead and open up the file. I'm using Adobe Illustrator for this since it's a vector file, but you can also apply the same tricks in Photoshop as well. The first step is to make sure that the design is sized on the artboard to the size that we want the actual pin to be. So Craig wanted this pin to be 2.2 inches tall. So I have my rulers open here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a guide at 2.2 inches. And then I'm going to go ahead and resize the design. So that now it is 2.2 inches on the artboard. Now the first thing that I'm going to want to check is all of the small details in here, because when enamel pins get produced, the metal outlines, so everything that you see here in black is representative of a metal outline. In production, those outlines will expand a little bit, and so we just want to make sure that any small details are going to be big enough that when that happens, they don't get too small and we can't fill them in with any enamel color. So to do that, I'm going to utilize the ellipse tool. I'm going to just pick a bright color that I'll be able to see on the screen. And I'm going to make a small circle that is the size of our recommended minimum size for any area that you want to fill with enamel. And so that size is actually it's around 0.02 inches. So that gives us this tiny little dot here. And so I'm gonna actually pull that dot and move it over the artwork, so I can make sure that all of these little areas are roughly around that minimum size. So as you can see here, these little details in the TV should all be okay. So I'm basically just gonna pull that over the design in any area that I'm worried might be too small to fill in. If an area that you're looking at is a little bit smaller than our recommended size, you can either ask us, or if it's just a little bit smaller, we can generally make it work or assume that it's going to work. Oh, there's one more area right here. So like this area here, it's a little bit smaller than our minimum recommended fill size, but we know that this will probably work. When in doubt, you can always ask us, or just go ahead and make any small details that minimum size. So the next thing that we'll want to check, aside from small details, is these cutouts here. So these areas that have the red X, that is showing us that they want these areas to be punched out or cut out. So we also have a minimum size recommendation for anything that needs to get cut out. And so I'll basically do the same thing. I'll create a circle with that minimum size recommendation for cutouts, which is 2 millimeters, or that translates roughly to 0.079 inches. So that'll give us this circle, which I'll then use. I'll pull it over the art and just make sure that any of these areas that need to get cut out look like they are going to be viable and look like they're at least around that 2 millimeter size. And then the other thing that we typically do, especially for pins that have a lot of detail, is we will go ahead and print this out on paper at the size that it's going to be on the final pin, and we'll take a look at that. That's a really good way to get an idea of how tiny those details are going to look on the final product. So here we have a sample of the enamel pin that we made for this design, so that you can see how all of those details in the artwork translated onto the final product. You can see how that cutout that we did in the middle of the legs is quite small. If it was any smaller than that, we might not have been able to do it, or it might have been really difficult. So because it was at that minimum size requirement, we were able to make it work. And that's how we check.